Hey investors and space nerds, welcome back to the channel. I'm Dave. Been a busy week so far for me, so it's been a little bit light on the YouTube front, but I am trying to make up for that today. Today what I have for you is a new edition of Space Stock Updates. Not too sure if I love that name actually, because we do talk about some companies that make a big impact in the industry that are not publicly tradable. So yeah, maybe let me know down in the comments if you have a different idea to kind of name this segment. I do want to keep doing it, I think, once every 2 weeks or so. Let me know if you find this kind of industry updates segment interesting, or if you prefer just focusing in on individual stocks. Sometimes I think it's a good segment, and other times I'm not so sure. Before we dive into that though, I hope you will consider subscribing if you haven't already. And if you are already a subscriber, all those likes and comments always help out with the algorithm showing it to more people. Okay, with that out of the way, let's dive into the latest edition of Space Stock Updates. So first off, our headline story is that Sierra Space is looking into IPOing after many years of preparations. If you're not as familiar with Sierra Space, they did spin off from Sierra Nevada Corporation and are mostly well known for their Dream Chaser space plane, which they've been working on for many years. They did bid it as a part of the commercial cargo crew program, but ultimately lost out to Dragon and the Boeing Starliner, although I'm betting many NASA officials wish they could have that one back when it comes to the Starliner. Nevertheless, they did continue to work on it. They had a contract for just cargo, but not crew, to the International Space Station, and they hope to have future work for it as well from other companies outside of the ISS, looking at things like the new Orbital Reef space station and other space stations as well. So very interesting company, very exciting to see the potential return of space planes. We haven't really seen any since the space shuttle era. This one looking very sleek, very new, actually fits inside fairings. They did recently raise capital at a valuation of over $5 billion, so they would be one of the big boys in the public space investing place, at least when it comes to pure play companies, as opposed to the likes of a Boeing or a Lockheed that also do a lot of their work in planes and other sections. In terms of pure space companies, they would be a fairly large player. And I think it'd be pretty exciting for investors to get a new solid company to invest in the space industry, especially as the Dream Chaser is getting set to fly this year. Hopefully it's already been integrated and getting ready to go on that first flight. Very exciting, and I do wish them the best. But in case you're not aware, Sierra Space is not only about the Dream Chaser. They also landed a part in the massive SDA deal that Rocket Lab themselves got a part of. Sierra Space actually will be receiving more revenue from the deal, if I remember correctly, than Rocket Lab is themselves, and they will be building out satellites for the Space Development Agency. So seems like a pretty solid company, and I for one am really looking forward to their eventual IPO. I think they probably timed it pretty well. We had a real dry spell for a while for IPOs, and I think they were smart to stay on the private markets and raise capital that way on their last capital raise, as opposed to trying to do it on the public markets, which have lately been very unkind to space companies which are not yet profitable. Okay, on to Rocket Lab. I'm sure we all know, if we follow Rocket Lab, that they did have that big announcement of the capital raise and the subsequent drop that followed. I thought the most interesting thing that I didn't really mention very much was the massive amounts of volume we saw. So we can see they're usually trading, 5 million shares or below. And then for the 2 days, February 1st and February 2nd, we're talking 61 million shares and 47 million changing hands. Just absolutely massive volume numbers for the stock. At least it does seem to have stabilized though after a rough couple of days and settled above that $4 per share mark, which is pretty nice. Personally, I do think we will have a bit of a rebound, or at least I hope so, but we'll have to wait and see on that. Continuing with Rocket Lab, some pretty cool pictures from their most recent launch. We have some people looking on the newest version of their rocket. It did have several changes to make it more reusable and very buoyant in the waters. This is them getting ready to bring it back aboard the ship. Really cool shots, and as we can see, it is being brought on board. It looks like there is some wear and tear with these marks here, and perhaps some paint and coating coming off, but overall does look to be in pretty good shape. Another cool shot from Rocket Lab. I just thought this image was super cool looking, and shout out to Canada with the Canada arm there, grabbing on to that Cygnus cargo craft, bringing supplies to the ISS. They're pointing this out because these are Rocket Lab's solar panels powering this spacecraft, and they really do have their hand in most things these days, one way or another. So this comes courtesy of their Solero solar business. This was also another amazing shot with Rocket Lab. There is an additional skirt that they didn't have on previous launches around the edge of the engines, and the engines to me just look to be in amazing shape considering they did re-enter the atmosphere engine first. You know, they look very good to me, and I'm hopeful that maybe this rocket could even be one of the first reused rockets, because it did have several updates, an extra shiny silver layer on the rocket here, as well as that extra skirt around the engines for protection. So maybe these are the final changes that really need to be made before they end up reusing a full Electron. We'll have to wait and see on that one though. A few additional pieces of news to add. First of all, Rocket Lab has just finally announced their next launch for 2024, which will be their second launch. It is for the company Astroscale, and it will be launching a orbital debris inspection satellite with the eventual goal of preparing the way for deorbiting and removing space junk. An extremely important issue that only grows more important as we see more launches and more satellites in orbit. So the launch window does open on February 19th, and it is a 14-day window, meaning it could happen any time in the following 2 weeks. The launch will also be from Launch Complex 1 in New Zealand, and after launching on Electron, this 150-kilogram satellite is going to approach an aged, derelict rocket stage in orbit to observe it closely, understand how it behaves, and determine potential methods for its assisted deorbiting in the future. Very exciting to hear Rocket Lab's next launch coming up, because we do know they really have to pick up the pace if they're going to hit that 22 launch cadence for 2024. Also, we've gotten a handy chart from Business Wire upon the closing of this upsized $355 million offering from Rocket Lab. So the conversion price is $513. We're seeing 0 shares issuable there. 100% above the stock price is $804. 0 shares issuable there. However, once you hit $9, we're seeing 7.4, $10 is 13.6, $11 is 18.6, and $12, 22.9. Note, this assumes that upon conversion, Rocket Lab will settle the principal amount of the notes in cash. And also, these notes will not be redeemable before February 1st, 2027. The effective conversion price of $804 is after giving effect to the capped call transactions. NASA also asking the industry to make some proposals around private missions to Mars. Pretty exciting. Could impact Rocket Lab in a small way. It's almost like a Mars version of CLPS, or the Commercial Lunar Payload program that NASA is basically getting private companies to send payloads to the moon, sort of like Intuitive Machines, who are planning to send their Nova C lander as well. Now, these are just for studies right now and not massive amounts of dollars. So we're starting looking at like $200,000 for a study of one of the reference missions, or $300,000 for a maximum of 2 studies. Not massive amounts of money, but could potentially be a good sign for the future as we see commercial companies delivering payloads direct to Mars for NASA. Now, we know Rocket Lab already built 2 Mars spacecraft for NASA, and I do believe Electron can at least deliver a very small payload to Mars. I know it can for Venus, so I think with that kick stage, they could potentially bid on some of these missions. The payloads can be as small as 20 kilograms, so yeah, that could potentially even open the door for Electron. I'd have to look at it in more detail and see what kind of a payload they're getting to Venus for that mission. But to me, it sounds plausible at least, which is pretty interesting and a good sign for the future. Yeah, and this is once again all on board on the way home, and we have the shiny coating I mentioned that looks upgraded since the last Electron we saw. A cool looking video of the rocket floating in the water, very buoyant. I thought it would be a little lower down. Certainly doesn't seem to be having much trouble at all with the water, which I think is a good sign. Peter Beck saying, now this is a marine asset I like, obviously joking because he's said many times before he's not a fan of marine assets. And then one more update from Rocket Lab here is they did include a sample of the Neutron thermal protection system on their latest Electron to see how it fares compared to Electron's thermal protections. You can see this little square looks to be in pretty much perfect shape versus the area around it with more wear and tear. So the materials being used for Neutron at least appear to be very strong and another good sign. This is definitely one advantage Rocket Lab would have versus, say, a Relativity or another company that can't test out their materials on a different rocket that they're already operating. So just another example of Rocket Lab having a step up for Neutron by already operating Electron. Impulse Space did make an interesting announcement. Now, this one is a little bit old, so sorry I haven't covered it previously, but I did think it was worth a mention. Basically, this will be a high-energy kick stage that'll be good for moving things around in orbit or transferring from low Earth orbit to geostationary orbit, almost like a third stage. Could go on various launch vehicles. It's launch vehicle agnostic, so could go on a Falcon 9. They mentioned it going on. Could go on a Relativity Terran R, and, you know, who knows? Maybe it could go on a Neutron one day, although obviously Neutron quite a bit of a smaller vehicle than the Terran R. Very cool looking vehicle. Apparently it can take a regular Falcon and get a payload to Geo. Previously you would need a Falcon Heavy to carry, so it could be quite useful. Impulse remains a very interesting company and one to watch, trying to complement SpaceX and do things like assuming Starship will succeed and figuring out vehicles to move payloads around that Starship gets into orbit, as opposed to trying to compete with SpaceX. Starlab is a joint venture space station between Voyager Space and the European-based Airbus company. They did announce that they were planning to fit the entire thing in a single Starship payload fairing, which is extremely exciting. We all know the future of the ISS is quite uncertain, but it's going to end eventually, so we do need some commercial alternatives. And yeah, I for one really hope that this space station does get built and does get launched. Definitely won't launch earlier than 2028, and I'd imagine much later than that. But between this, the orbital reef, whatever's going on with that, they've been rumors lately. There's a lot of stuff up in the air, and Axiom Space as well. There's a lot up in the air when it comes to the future of commercial space stations in orbit. There was an article here about Firefly Aerospace, mostly talking about the next launch also being responsive, but the part that I found most interesting was mentioning that the mishap investigation for their previous launch issues is still underway, although they think they understand the root cause and it's something that they can definitely fix, which is obviously good news for Firefly. So here's hoping they get that fixed and get launching soon. They also had a similar statement from CEO Bill Weber on January 31st. And he did say that they will have more information to share in the weeks ahead as they wrap up their review. Of course, Firefly also working on MLV, which is going to be launching right next to Neutron and will be a medium launch vehicle and a Neutron competitor. So it'll be interesting to see both those vehicles launching out of Wallops, really increasing the launch cadence from that site and competing right next to each other. Now, there was also an interesting Starship report written up by Payload Research, and they were researching, the cost it would take to develop the Starship and how much SpaceX might charge and all this. It's a really interesting read if you want to check it out. It's free. But if we dive in briefly here to Starship cost analysis, they have said that they expect Starship's lifetime R&D cost to be near $10 billion. It crossed $5 billion in the end of 2023 with $2 billion of expenses in 2023 alone. So some massive spending in R&D for Starship as they build out that entire program and vehicle. So, due to these high R&D and startup costs, they'll need to amortize all these costs across Starship launches. The more launches they have, the lower they can charge, but they'll still have to amortize and get that money back somehow for launch. Outside of those R&D 10 billion number, though, they did want to do an analysis of how much it might cost for SpaceX to build out refurb Starship. So they had a lot of different analysis here. They're saying today $90 million to manufacture a fully integrated Starship, which is actually quite good when you think about the size of the vehicle. Most companies don't disclose this, but being a reusable vehicle, it can be higher than if it were a one-off, obviously. This is broken down into the Raptor 2 engines, which are $39 million, labor $35 million, and structures $13 million, as well as heat shield tiles $2 million. Tanks are another $2 million, avionics $3 million. Anyway, it's just interesting to see the breakdown. They do think that once it's operational, they can get the fully considered cost per reusable Starship launch to drop less than $10 million. They're saying this is SpaceX's internal cost, not the cost they would charge customers, as they would still want to recoup all those investments that they have along the way. And frankly, if you can charge more and you're a for-profit company, you're going to charge as much as you can without reducing demand for your launch vehicle. Some bad news for Virgin Galactic, yet again, unfortunately. They did successfully launch 4 private astronauts on January 26th. This was interesting for a few reasons. Number one is they had an additional customer, where before they would have a astronaut trainer and an employee in that 4th seat. Now, this time around, there was 4 customers, so that's an extra paying seat. Not enough to make this vehicle profitable, and they still are intending to bring it offline, though, very soon. And bad news when it comes to the vehicle: there was a dropped pin, which apparently helps secure the spacecraft to the mothership, and that is triggering an anomaly investigation with the FAA. Apparently there was no safety issues. There was no danger to either the mothership or the actual spacecraft or the crew, so it's great that there was no danger. Seems like there will be a delay on when their next launch was set to occur. Personally, I wonder if it's even worth going through this whole process if you're about to cancel this vehicle anyway and get on with your Delta spacecraft. Why not just cancel it early? But they do say they are going to remain committed to flying the next mission, even though they will have to take corrective action and issue a report that the FAA needs to approve. So a little bit of bad news there for Virgin Galactic. Honestly, I don't want to make it seem like the end of the world, because for this company, I think it really does all come down to Delta, not Unity. So I think, yeah, Delta is the bet the company moment. They need to get that up and running profitably, and good luck to them on this one. We'll wait and see if that report gets cleared by the FAA. Speaking of Delta and the future of Virgin Galactic, we did have a new analyst following them saying they would be blasting off to positive cash flow in mid-2026. Interesting report from TD Cowen. So even though they do have that kind of sensational headline, the target price for the stock is actually not really that high. He did say that future scaling to weekly flights by the second half of 2026 is dependent on build of VSS Delta spaceships, which carry better unit economics versus Unity, as we all know, because Unity is not profitable. The Delta spacecraft will have 6 seats and be capable of making up to 8 flights a month, compared with Unity's 1 space flight a month on 3 or 4 seats. I don't know. I'm sure they had their reasons why they didn't go with more seats. To me, it just seemed like maybe, instead of 6, if you can build a spacecraft with a 20-seat, 50-seat, that would carry better economics, but maybe that just wasn't feasible. Delta is supposed to increase Virgin Galactic's monthly revenue from the current maximum of $2.4 million to a potential $28 million per month. Anyway, so after all this, TD Cowen has an outperform rating on the company with a $2.50 price target for Virgin Galactic. Of 11 analysts currently covering the stock, we have 2 buys, 5 holds, 4 underweight or sell. 250, it's definitely higher than the stock's trading, but, definitely way below where it has been in the past. That's all I have for you guys today. I hope you did find this interesting. Lots of news about Rocket Lab, about Sierra Space, Virgin Galactic, and many others. Let me know what stories I missed. There's always so many out there. It's impossible to cover them all. Let me know what else was most interesting to you. If you found this interesting, let me know, and I'll be sure to continue these segments. If not, maybe I can move on and do something else. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next video. Hope you have a great week. Bye for now.